Hello and welcome back to And It's Live. I am your host for this, hopefully, one time only, Adam Thornton, and I'm joined by David Edgar. How are you?
I'm good, thank you, Adam. Yes, we are a ship without its captain this week. And we'll need to...
Here we are.
It's coincidentally, I know this through my nephew, that today, as we record in Scotland, is the last day of school. And it feels like that. It feels like that for us. Did you bring in Kerplunk and Snakes and Ladders?
I did not. So I'm going to assume that's because he's doing his exams. It is the last day before Easter holidays for my kids.
It's not,
It's not. Oh, you're terrible.
Your kids are still primary school. No, it's his last day of school, and it, how fitting then, I suppose, when we're going through memories on this show. Yes. He's tapped £100 off me to go to the pub. He is 18 before any eagle-eared listener gets in touch, but he got in touch, and I had to give him it because of his honesty. He said, I need the money to go to the pub. Had he lied and said it was for study books or whatever, I would have known. So yeah, fair play to him. But, I mean, this is our period of being young and innocent, isn't it? When we were watching these football matches.
Absolutely, yes. We are without Martin, as we said. He's tied up, so we thought we're not allowed to really be frivolous when Martin is here and have a bit of fun, because he's very serious about his history. So we thought we would just basically ignore that and have a bit of a fun Easter weekend, not a quiz really, but a rating show. So it's going to be very, very quick, very light. We're doing a lot of analysis of these players as we go. We thought it would just be fun to have a look at the most 90s player, I think I'm looking at. So we're going to try and create a top three between the two of us. Now, it's not the best player of the 90s. I guess we're asking who feels most inseparable from that very specific version of the Premier League that we've been speaking about. The collars, the hair, the strips, the Sky hype, the tabloid nonsense, all of that stuff. So by all means, if the best player is also the player that sums up the 90s, then fair enough. We're really not going to quibble about it. But yeah, I thought this was just a fun little halfway house episode in between the seriousness, David.
100%. And, you know, that's the thing. It doesn't need to be. There are names that I think conjure up this era. And as you said there, it conjures up the kits and it conjures up the coverage on Sky, and it conjures up that sense actually of football exploding that we try to capture on here. Things like, you know, the Cantona billboard that Nike put up, the Nike advert. Remember the Nike advert for the World Cup in '98 where they were playing football through the... Yeah, I mean, these were all, I think, cultural signifiers, and it's such a culturally significant period. Football really did feel like it was connected almost directly to the zeitgeist, and I don't think that's the case now. And I think now football exists in its own bubble, and it's big enough now, you know, easily to sort of be divorced from everything. But it wasn't then, and you know, footballers would appear at both ends of the newspapers, and they would be they were in GQ, you know, as style icons and stuff. They would be at big gigs. You would see them there. And I suppose the nearest to that is maybe Pep at Oasis is the only recent one I can think of with a manager sort of doing that. But so it's players who almost become avatars for a certain sense of what the Premier League was like in the mid-90s.
For sure. So we're gonna each bring a top three. I think if for those of you who listen to the main event shows, David and Martin did maybe around about this time last year, kind of countdowns of managers, I think, and finals. So we'll do a condensed version of that. I've got a top three. I have to say I'm really happy with my top three. I'm not sure I've got it 100% locked down in terms of 1, 2, 3, but I'm happy with the three I've got. I don't think you'll have the same three as well. We haven't divulged that at all, so I'm keen to look through them, and we'll obviously agree who goes where. I've gone for what I think is not the best players, because I think the best players of this era are timeless, and they wouldn't necessarily be most 90s specifically. Some of them definitely straddle both, but I've gone for the players that are a mix of glamour, chaos, cult heroes, Barclays men to an extent as well, albeit I've tried to steer away from that a little bit too. So yeah, I'm really happy with my list. I'll start off with number 3 for me. I've went with David Ginola. I just think he is a great player. I'm not necessarily saying that he is only in a cult hero status. I don't mean that at all. I'm going for the Newcastle version of Ginola with a big baggy strip, the Gallic flair, the long hair, that sort of throwback now to a kind of winger like that who wouldn't really exist now. For me, he's a very, very 90s creative player. So he's my number 3.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned there the Newcastle. I sort of associate now Ginola more with Tottenham. That's my first thought. That's what I was trying to go with here. What image leapt into my mind? And strangely enough, it's Tottenham, which kind of shows you the impact I think he had at both those clubs. And with Tottenham, obviously he won the PFA Player of the Year, which a remarkable achievement for a side that wasn't going to win a title. And yeah, I mean, everything about the hair, the glamour, and the impact a player like that could have, Adam, I think is difficult now to have the same impact simply because of the lack of newness. We've had everything now. So you get admired, I think, as a very, very good player, but I'm not sure it can bring that same frisson of excitement that when Ginola pitched up in England and started, playing the way he did and looking the way he did. He's one of the most French-looking men in the world. In fact, I would go further and say that the Frenchest-looking men I think you'll ever see are David Ginola, Kylian Mbappe, and Oliver Giroud. I think all of them are just stereotypically in their own way French. But he was such an exciting player, when he pitched up here. But you're right. I mean, this is the era where he's the winger, so he stands over there until we've got the ball, and then you give him
off the ball, nothing like that. No running off the ball.
No demands on him at all to do that. And I think at Newcastle, obviously, initially he had a manager who would let that happen. He didn't then when Kenny Dalglish came in, because Kenny Dalglish liked his wingers. He liked Ripley, and he liked the fella on the other side. Who was it? The Man United guy. God, I can't remember. Jason Wilcox.
Yes.
Still current in football. I got Ripley and I didn't get Wilcox. But he liked his wingers who were up and down and cross machines. You get the ball in the box, you get the ball in the box. But he goes to Tottenham, and Tottenham, especially in this era, they love that maverick, that player who'll just get up and down the wing. So, you think David Ginola, you think a baggy strip, flowing hair, getting kicked, and not tracking back. Those are my memories of him.
So I think he's probably my third. Like I said, I'm not precious about the rating, but I think he's probably my third when I think about the other two. Who would you have as your third then?
Well, I'm starting in Newcastle as well, oddly enough, which I think maybe is a good indication of the cultural significance that side have, or 90s relevancy that they have. The place in the Pantheon is established. And I've gone for Rob Lee.
Oh,
because he was a constant component of that Newcastle team throughout the 90s, from early, from like 93, 94 onwards, all the way through. And he was always there, and he was always good. And I think if you look at his numbers now, I went back and looked, because I had it in my head that I remember him scoring a surprising amount of goals, and he did. He was an absolutely key component of that side, and he made it into the England side. And yet, I think he was never somebody who was afforded, because of the glamour that they had around them. I actually think a player like Rob Lee, I don't know about you, I think we value midfielders more now than we maybe did then.
Definitely.
I think we value them a little bit more than we did then. And I think now he would be lauded, and I think he would go for an awful lot of money. But to me, he the reason I picked him was, to me, he is indicative of changing, but not fully changed yet. I think the 90s, obviously, is the link between the 80s and the 21st century. Of course it is. But I think it's more than that, the 90s. I think it's a link from the old football and the new, 20th century football and 21st. And it's true, if you've got if you've got two long, lights, the thing that connects them is usually quite small. And that to me, what the 90s sort of represents. And I think he was a mixture of that Brian Robson, hard tackling, get up and down the pitch, you never stop, you're box to box, you're not a defensive midfielder, you're not an attacking midfielder, you're both, you know, that era, run about mad. And a more nuanced player, and certainly developed into that, someone who said, okay, I can do all of this, but maybe I'm better off concentrating on A, B, and C rather than try to do A to F. And I to me, that's what he represents in that period. And obviously, he was a very, very good player as well.
I think, yeah, you've nailed that. Brian Robson was the example I was going to make. I feel like Rob Lee was maybe a little bit underrated in that sense. And you're right, throughout that decade, he almost timestamped the way that midfielders were changing, because it was all action, run about, like you said, I'm going to be one of a two. And then, you can play a little bit deeper and take a little bit more time on the ball and pick your passes. And he sort of evolved with that. So, yeah, that's a really good shout. Obviously, great for Newcastle, and did go on and play for another couple. He played for West Ham, didn't he, for sure? But there was one in between. I can't remember who it was.
And he has a lot more England caps than I think people might remember. But yeah, just a really, really solid player who I think was very well respected, but maybe to me, it we were picking what they represented. And like I say, to me, he is the changing face of what was considered to be a good midfielder. He's a different midfielder in 1999 than he was in 1991, I think it's fair to say.
No, I agree. Okay, so we'll do a top three at the end, then a combined one. But my number two is Fabrizio Ravanelli.
Yes.
He came. I was going to say he came hard and fast. That is not the right term.
That's not the tone. You can tell Martin's not here.
Yeah, he burned hard and he burned quickly. I think I've just said the same thing again there. But yeah, one season. What a season. If I have my sort of timestamps as glamour, chaos, cult status, foreign star power, Premier League weirdness, then I think he probably fits every single one of those. It was just the epitome of the changing face of the Premier League. This guy, as we said on the shows, coming from Juventus right after like Champions League at the top, and he's coming to Middlesbrough. To me, that just summed up how it was. The Premier League was basically having to run before it could walk, really, and it was just accelerating so quickly. There was so much money flying about that it was difficult to keep up. And I think Ravanelli pitching up at Middlesbrough is just one of those glitches in the matrix. Even if they paid him a lot of money, it's the fact that Middlesbrough were able to pay that amount of money a few years on from the start of the Premier League was fascinating. And yeah, that Middlesbrough team growing up, I think I was 10 or 11, round about the point that they were peaking there, and it was just everything that you wanted to see. So yeah, Ravanelli, I think for me is in second place.
I think that's a great shout because of what it represents. You're absolutely right that this was the first of what would become what we now know, which is that teams in the English Premier League, because they are in the English Premier League, can sign players that ordinarily they should not have a shout of. A recent example I always think was Evan Nielsen of Bournemouth now, but previously of Porto. Now, in a sane and just world, Bournemouth FC should not be able to sign Porto's star striker who's attracting interest from Spain and Germany and Italy, but they can. And this, as you say, was the first one where you went, what's he doing there? I mean, it still sounds faintly ludicrous now. The guy had played in 3 Champions League finals in the previous 3 years. And then he's in England and he's playing for Middlesbrough spectacularly for the time, well remunerated for doing so. And that was the key factor. So yeah, if you want an indication of where football is headed, because it's not here yet, players are still going to Serie A. We spoke about this on the show where we did that summer, that here was the first of the players, their agent saying, by the way, I can get you twice as much in England than I can get you if you stay in Serie A. The league's better here. I don't think that's arguable at the time. But if you go over there, so he's sort of like a pioneer, really, in what now is just common.
No, for sure, 100%. Okay, number 2 for you.
Well, I was going to have him at number 1, but as we're not doing it in order, I'll join you then because it's similar to yours, and that's Gianfranco Zola. And again, it's what he represented when he came. Now, Chelsea were very glamorous. We've tried, I think, to get that across here. That at the time, Chelsea, they weren't this behemoth that they became in the 21st century, and they weren't. They didn't have this track record of winning that they do now in 2025. So they were viewed differently. They were viewed as a bit glam, lot of good players, but never quite being there and fun. They were viewed as I think quite a fun team. And obviously Hoddle comes in and then Hullet, which was impossibly glam at the time. Yeah. But for me, the reason I went for Zola ahead of Hullet was that Hullet, I think, he was past his best. People knew that. He was coming to Chelsea to play sweeper, because his legs had gone a bit. Zola was sort of, he was very close to that top echelon. And as you pointed out in the show, and I urge people to go back and listen to it, Zola arrives and it's like, oh, wait a minute, this is a number 10. This is not a striker. It's not a deep lying forward, which we sort of had experience of in the UK. This is a completely separate position that will require other players in this team to adapt to how he plays, rather than him playing off a big striker and adapting to him. There aren't many people who can say that they revolutionise a position within a country, but I think he can. He's not a number 9. He's not, as I say, an attacking midfielder. Those were sort of the two. Yep. We were comfortable with those two ideas. And here comes somebody who says, no, there's a whole line here, or a whole space between the defence and midfield where I can operate, and that's where I exclusively operate, and I'm going to. And I think pretty soon every team wanted one, and every team wanted someone who could do what he did. So I think in a way he sort of changes the way a lot of people over here think about it. Cantona's I thought about Cantona, and I mean he's so iconic for this reason that I didn't pick him, because he was so iconic. But Cantona's still a striker to me. Yeah. Yes, he can play a bit deeper and he can come and take the ball, but he can also play on the half turn, and you can put him up against a big centre half and he'll dominate him physically. Zola's totally different. So, and again, there was this thing of, Jesus Christ, Zola, he's playing at Chelsea.
And so that's where it's probably really high praise. I guess that's where I've lumped Zola in with that as well. So I've sort of portioned off Cantona, Zola and Bergkamp as a little bubble of you would be excellent in any year, any decade of the Premier League. But yeah, for sure, Gianfranco Zola, probably out of the 3, Gianfranco Zola is probably my favourite. If we're going for favourite 90s players, then Zola probably wins for me, for sure. Okay, so number 1 for me then, I think you've maybe spoiled yours then, but number 1 for me, I went for Matt Tissier, and I hummed and hawed on this because I felt like it maybe veered into that Barclays man territory, but I feel like if he was the Barclays man, he was the epitome of Barclays men. So I also do associate him with the 90s. When I think in my head, you mentioned Ginola in a Spurs shirt. most of the time when I think in my head, I probably go straight to Shearer and then Matt Le Tissier for whatever reason. I don't have a reason for it. It's just one of those things. Those goals, the Dell dancing about, the big baggy shirts, like again, just incredible and summed it up. Wouldn't be a player that would survive in this era at all,
No.
unfortunately. And it's something that we reminisce about, don't we? We miss that these type of players just wouldn't exist because either they would have all the individuality drilled out of them, or they simply just wouldn't be fit enough or have enough work rate off the ball to really exist at the top level anymore. So all of that combined for me, I think I've got Matt Le Tissier in there as my number one pick. David, I know you were a big fan of him as well, but what's your thoughts on that?
He's iconic for this era. You cannot. Nobody can quibble with your pick here, Adam, because he is such an essential part of it. On your point there about he just wouldn't survive, it's so interesting because I remember in sort of the mid 2000s. Do you remember Lee Trundle?
Oh yes, that's who came to my mind as I was speaking there.
Yeah, I'm not comparing him in terms of ability before anyone gets wild, but you would see him, in the highlights clips. This is the Soccer AM era, and he would be doing these outrageous things. And I wondered, why is nobody in the Premier League signing him? And it sort of then hit me. It's like, because you can't have a player like that anymore. You can have him in the lower divisions where clubs will still be able to, build around one guy or build a thing to do him. But especially in that era, which was the Benitez Mourinho era, you can't really have a player who will do that. And Le Tissier, I think you're right, would have ended up, as you say, either having to have the individuality coached out of him. I mean, now, you hear coaches saying, don't try shots from low percentage angles because we'll give the ball away. I mean, he couldn't thrive in that era at all. When you think outrageously gifted player in terms of just natural ability, comfortable in his own skin at Southampton, wasn't keen at all on going elsewhere. That will always be the big question, won't it? Again, I don't believe you could get that now. His club would insist on selling him because the financial reward would be so big. No matter the player's wish to remain at the club, he would, even if it was just for, even like Wilfried Zaha going to Man United and heading back to Crystal Palace within a year, you'd still have to go to it. So he is almost a relic from another era, the one club man at a small club who played for England yet wasn't at Man United or Liverpool or didn't have a brief spell anywhere. He just stayed there, pottered about most of the season, and then banged in 20 beauties. And there's something really sweet about it. But as you say, it couldn't happen now. Sadly, it just couldn't.
The England things came full circle a little bit, hasn't it? Like it was, like you said, it was a big deal, I thought, for Rob Lee to get the number of caps that he got, and similar for Le Tissier as well, because it wasn't always the case that we see now. That I don't want to disservice anyone, but we see now it is the quality of the Premier League at the minute shows that, like, you can play for Bournemouth or you can play for Aston Villa or whatever and still be in and around squads and still easily be getting 5 caps a season if you're good enough at those teams, whereas it wasn't really the case. I know Le Tissier only got 8, and I think that's an absolute travesty, but it's not even necessarily that the quality was more there. I think it was just all a bit more centralised in a few clubs. We know that from the golden generation coming through as well. It was Liverpool, Man U, Arsenal, and then latterly some Chelsea as well. So I think it's easy to underplay it in an era now where your Tyrone Mings can be in squads quite a bit, or Bournemouth centre halves can be up in the Premiership for just a couple of seasons, but getting caps. So I think it's important to mention it. Okay, so I think we've got 5 there, didn't we? So we had Rob Lee, David Ginola, Gianfranco Zola, Fabrizio Ravanelli twice, and Matt Le Tissier. Who do you want to have as your number 3 then out of that bunch? What do we think?
It's a toughie. I think you've got to go Ravanelli because we both picked him. So I think you've got to go him. he ushers in the era of, wow, anyone in England, if they're prepared to pay the money, which they do generally have, and now they all have, it's just a fact of life. If you go, I mean, recently, Nottingham Forest first summer spend 170 million. Sunderland last year spend 100 million because they can, you know, that we are used to it now. There's no surprise when you see a club, any club in the Premier League linked with a player from a top 5 club in a top 5, another top 5 league. There's no surprise there whatsoever when that happens. There was a shitload of it in 1996 or 1995 when Fabrizio Ravanelli was pitching up at the Riverside. So for that, for what he signifies, I think you've got to have him in.
Right. Okay. So yeah, I agree with that. I'm happy with him as number 3. I think I had him as number 2. My number 2 pick then out of everyone I've mentioned, I did come into it wanting to avoid Zola, but I really don't feel like I can. So I think I'll probably go for Matt Le Tissier as number 2 then combined, if you're happy with that.
Yeah, you can't. No, you ask 100 EPL fans to name a 90s player, 80% he'll be in a mention anyway. He's so iconic for this year. We can all name a goal. We can all remember. I mean, what he did to poor Tim Flowers that time. He should have been up in court for that. So yeah, I think, and as we say, what he represents, the hometown hero that stays at the club, doesn't bugger off to the bigger contract. Which is what a player would go for now, isn't made to by his club either, and just potters along quite happy, scoring the goals that keeps his own team up, isn't bothered about winning trophy. As we've seen by his subsequent career, he's a fairly uniquely minded individual.
Certainly is.
Not your typical player, but we're only judging him here as a player.
Absolutely.
He's such... He kind of... You show me a year review for the 90s that he ain't on.
That's a very good way of putting it on, and I think it would be the same for who I think we've agreed is our number 1, which would be Gianfranco Zola. I think did mention absolutely timeless and would probably fit into this for pretty much every category you could think of. I think it's a worthy winner. I'm happy with that. Ravanelli, Le Tissier, and Zola screams the most 90s players of all time to me. Okay.
I think so. The only other one that I considered, but I dropped because it was for, in a way, non-football reasons, and it was Beckham, because the relationship, the mixture of pop music and football at a time, the front page, the fuss, but then he's not uniquely 90s.
No.
Because he carries on into the 2000s and he carries on being brand. In fact, you could argue that when was that free kick against Greece? 2001. So you could argue it's not even remotely close to the peak that doesn't happen in the night. So I think he is an important signifier of something that was going on, but I don't think you can. The question was 90s, and although he's part of the 90s, I think he transcends it a little bit in the way that these guys don't really.
Yeah, let's look out for the most 2000 show, and there hopefully will be a.
He could be in that.
Yeah, other ones that I had just before we finish up, other ones that I toyed with were Faustino Asprilla, came quite close.
Yeah,
if I'm being honest. Jurgen Klinsmann again falls in more in that timeless category a little bit, but he sort of popped up again, just thinking in my head who came up, and then the last one was probably Juninho, but I basically went between would I pick Juninho or would I pick Ravanelli, and Ravanelli won out for me. Yeah, no, I'm happy with that. I think that's a good list, and it was a fun little half show almost. We hit about 29 minutes there, so thank you, David, for joining me, and we'll see what we can come up with for the next break. Okay, we'll be back next week with normal scheduled programming. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you then.